Hello. Yeah, I'm Chris. I basically been a web developer for 25 years, and I worked at Yahoo, worked at Mozilla. The last 8 years I worked at Microsoft, where I was the principal program manager and product manager for the developer tools in the Edge browser, and also the Chromium developer tools that we shared with Google, and working on VS Code. So I know this shit, basically. I wanted to talk today about an unfortunate thing that's happening in our market right now, that after we've been pampered and looked after for years and years and sought after, out of a sudden it seems like we're also being hit by technology innovation, and our market is basically, companies are saying we're having AI now, we don't need you developers any longer, so what can we do to make your life horrible so you leave on your own behalf, or what can we do to actually make sure that we can get cheaper by and getting the same work out of you. So I've got all the resources in this talk on this computer bar thing here, so you don't need to write down the URLs, and it's really, really easy for you to sort these things out. So I wrote this talk a few days ago, and I finished this one a few hours ago because I had actually given them in a different context. I had given them in a DevRel environment, and I also was very miffed about all these changes that are happening in the job market. I'm currently unemployed this month, funemployed really, because I got a new job next month. But it was interesting for me to see with somebody with my pedigree to have a hard time finding a job that I really wanted, because companies changed a lot and they want us to do all kind of things. So our job market is in turmoil. The world is in turmoil right now. And when you look at like layoffs.fyi, you can see month over month which companies are actually not hiring anymore and which companies are actually laying people off. So I wrote this really angry fire and brimstone talk about like how we should stand up for our human rights and our workers' rights. Like, my dad was a coal miner, factory workers in the family, so all leftist, socialist, terrible people that American people don't like. And I was thinking that's too much for a pub setting, so let's not do that. So I actually shortened it a bit, and I wrote a blog post about it. So it's professional web developers and DevRel people who are not students right now. Go and read that blog post. That's where all the things are in there, where I basically say, like, here's how companies that say AI is replacing us are talking bollocks, and here's how you can actually talk to your own company to be seen as an AI expert and actually cement your position in the company. So for now, let's take a closer look at AI myths and things to be aware of. Because AI is like exploding right now, and there's so much unnecessary things out there that we are worried about. So here's a few facts that we're going to go through bit by bit. AI is in full hype mode. That's something we just have to remember. Everything that we read right now is 90% hyperbole. Like, everybody who was a Web3 and blockchain expert on LinkedIn became an AI expert in like 3 days. So they're all getting excited about like the 5 ChatGPT things you need to do to not fall behind or whatever. It will take some jobs. Conversational AI doesn't scale, and that's something that I want to talk about in a bit as well. And ChatGPT is really fun, but it's a terrible teacher. It's a really bad idea to learn programming through ChatGPT. And AI does affect our careers, and that's something that I find most intriguing about this. So 5 years ago, I did a course on Skillshare about demystifying artificial intelligence and understanding machine learning, because that title made it sound like I'm clever and I know things. And it was actually fun to record. It was more about like the ethics of AI, what you can do with machine learning, what you shouldn't do with machine learning, how to trust results, and so on and so forth. And I'm a big fan of the AI thing. I mean, I think we not have reached AI yet. We call everything AI right now, but it's still machine learning and a lot of lookups in essence. It's not like a thinking machine yet. And I'm actually really worried about the hype around it, that people keep talking about it as if it's already a thing and something that we should be using for everything out there without thinking about the repercussions or the ethical side of it. So the New Scientist had this great comic in the other day where it's like there's a science fiction author saying, my novel is a cautionary tale about capitalism and the consequences of creating powerful technologies without considering the moral implications. And then company owners saying, like, great, this novel is so cool, let's build all these things. Like, ubiquitous computing is a great thing, like having a machine like an Alexa in your house that actually does things for you. But if I told you like 10 years ago, can I put a microphone in your house and it records everything and sends the data somewhere in America and China? You'd be like, no. What about if it tells you the weather outside? Okay, I'm gonna have it now. That sounds really, really useful. You know, we're giving people data that we don't actually know that we're giving them. And AI is really, really in the biggest hype scale. So you get all these people telling you everywhere which chat GPT things to use to work out. And I got really annoyed when, as a web developer who's been spending 25 years making the biggest websites out there, making them available to everybody out there, one of the chat GPT demos that they had was this one, where he basically painted something on a website, on a piece of paper, and said like, that's a joke website, and build the code for that for me from that paper thing. So basically there's 2 buttons, reveal the joke and reveal the other joke, because that's obviously an app anybody would buy and we have to build every day, right? It makes total sense. And then it actually, ChatGPT then actually turned it into really horrible JavaScript. And he showed here in CodePen how to use that. If the picture is bad quality, so was the code that was generated. So it's actually on purpose. So, but that became a big thing. Like lots of startups are offering that right now. There's one called Galileo AI that basically says like, okay, you can type a sentence in and it will build a website for you. So in this case, it's like a dog walking website and it shows you then, here is the design of the dog walking website. Give me a sign up form for some random stuff and it creates that sign up form for you as well. And the thing about that is that looks really powerful, but that is actually a very, very terrible way to start building a web product. Because in essence, this is like downloading a WordPress template and saying like you've got a product, or taking any of the things that PowerPoint generated for you and say you have a presentation. So it's all a bit samey. So it says like there's thousands of outstanding designs that we copy over. And if you start a product and your product is basically a copy of something successful, that's nothing to be proud of, and that's actually nothing that the world, to a degree, needs. But okay, there is a market for it. What I like best is that it actually says it also creates the product copy for you. So you're not needed anymore. So you can create a company a day, create it using this system and roll it out there. And my biggest issue with it is, first of all, the quality of it, but second of all, the limitation of it. When you start with a graphical design to build a product on the web, it's a really, really bad idea because you're limiting yourself already. You should think about the idea of it, but we're going to come back to that. And it's been quite a worrying thing. This was in the Washington Post the other day, that lots of people who wrote SEO content and wrote marketing content are now being replaced by GPT and now have to become dog walkers and things like that. And I'm like, your job was to write content that nobody wants to read, and you're surprised if a computer can do that better and optimize it for the search engine? You shouldn't be surprised about this. So, AI will take our jobs. Machines will take jobs away from us. But we have to consider what jobs we're actually getting taken away from us, and if humans should be doing them. This was on TechCrunch, where Microsoft said like Microsoft launches an AI tool to take the pain out of building websites. And it was about the Power Builder for Power Pages, and they call it Copilot now as well. So basically you can type a sentence in there and then AI does things and builds website for you. Who here builds Power Pages? My point exactly. This is a job we didn't have. This is a job that could be automated and should be automated, because as a web developer, you do beautiful things. You create things for humans out there and make great things. As somebody who builds SharePoint websites or Power Pages, you get to cry in the break room. These are basically the things that you need to do. These things are not meant to be programmed. These are meant for people to type things in and make websites and make products that other people can ignore because they said they didn't read the email. And they had this great 3-phase approach there. Say like, you can actually type an English sentence and it creates the product for you, the page. And then you can use the graphical interface, the drag and drop designer to fix it. And in the third step, it will then generate code in the modern frameworks to build things. And the last step, I think, will never, ever happen. Nobody will ever generate code from that and send it to anybody. It's just a marketing message that makes no sense to me, because web development is not creating a graphical interface or building a single interaction. This is actually what Front Page used to do, what Dreamweaver used to do for us. So these things, when you start with that, you're already in a world of pain, because you will have to start customizing that one design to the other needs, rather than thinking about what needs are there of my end users and what kind of product should I build for them. So professional user interfaces work in dozens of environments. They work on my mobile phone, they work on my computer, they work on my HoloLens, they work on my $3,000 diving equipment from Apple. They actually work on everything out there rather than just like they look like in one screen and that's what they look like. They allow for user customization. End users need to resize images. End users need to resize the font. Some people see it in a high contrast mode. Some people hear your websites and they need to have the chance to customize them. Once you started with a design that is a graphical design, that will not be possible. So every time I got a design from one of our designers back in Yahoo or someplace, I translated it into German and sent it back to them and said, like, if that fits, then we have a design. Because all of our words are like 5 times longer than they should be, and that actually makes a lot more sense. They favor the most important interactions. If you turn off JavaScript, if everything goes wrong, Google still is a search box that you can send off and you get a search result back. Because that's the main interaction that we needed to give to end users out there, and that's also their business model, to give you search results with ads around it. And you add more convenience when it is possible. So if JavaScript is enabled, if there is a good connection, then you actually show video previews, you show image previews, and so on and so forth, and you show them 10,000 ads rather than the search results that they came for. Professional development means, to me, first of all, not blocking anyone out. And you can't do that when you start with a design. You have to think about, like, why do people go to my website? They've got a dog, they have to find a dog walker. So a search box makes actually more sense than actually just a great image of a dog already and animations and whatever. Making sure that people's data is safe is another big thing as well, and that's, you can't do that from a graphical interface. Dealing with unknown content. People will type all kind of stuff into your content management system, and as a developer, your CSS should be dealing with that, either cutting the overflow off or making it into 2 columns when there's enough space, but not on 1 column when there's not enough space, and so on and so forth. Delivering experience as fast and convenient as possible. We had that earlier. Load the first thing importantly and load other things lazily afterwards. And when you start with a perfect design, this will not happen. So, AI will take our jobs. Boring, repetitive jobs, jobs that don't need to be done by developers, slideware, vaporware, prototypes, web scraping and data cleanup. Like, data cleanup is a great thing to use AI for, because you don't want to be the person that has like the 6,000 Excel sheets and have to find the typos in 3 of them. That's not going to be a fun thing to do. And of course, SEO and marketing horseshit. Content, I think it was, yeah. So, generative AI is everywhere, and it's an exciting newish way to create all kind of content. I remember when Google, like 4 years ago, did the first, like, design this picture, make this picture look like it's been painted by this artist, and it just looked awful and nobody cared. And then DALL-E came out, and Midjourney came out, and out of a sudden it's like everything is like, oh, I want to type something in and make the computer do something. It's super exciting. Because conversational UI is great. It actually lowers the barrier to access. Like when I tell somebody, hey, if you want to build a website, here's for HTML specifications, here's how to write your first thing, here's how to set up GitHub. But asking the computer, like, how can I make a website, and getting a bit-by-bit instruction is much more exciting for people, for now. It's highly engaging. It's really cool to ask the computer and feel like a director to the computer to make things for you and keep asking for more things, can you explain that, can you do that? Like having a conversation with a human, but with a very knowledgeable human that just answers immediately and is not sarcastic. And it has a true sci-fi feel. Every sci-fi show that we had on TV was like, computer, do this, and then like the computer did this, or the computer didn't do this. But it felt like something that we always wanted to have. This ubiquitous computing was something cool, and having a human interaction to talk to the computer felt like a very human thing to do. But what is interesting about it is that actually conversational UI has quite a few issues, and it has the same issues that we have with humans. Communication between humans is not optimized either. It's fraught with misunderstandings. It's really problematic at times, and you have to ask the right question to get the right information. And people don't give you the full answer, but you have to keep asking for more information. So the results are only as good as the questions. So if you ask for the right thing, if you say like, how can I do 2 columns next to each other, and basically the LLM model is like 2 years old and tells you use float for that, instead of like getting something new, you say like, how do I do a grid layout? But you need to know about grid already to get good answers in any programming environments. And it's time consuming. We don't feel it because we do like little questions and we get things back and we read it and we're constantly basically there. But I mean, you could talk to 15 minutes to chat GPT, or you could do a web search in a good search engine and with ads turned off, and you get immediately the first result. It's probably the faster way of doing it. There's no reliable attribution. So the results that are coming back, you have no idea where it came from. There's no information where they came from. The Bing chat does it, but that's also an interesting one because people don't use it. Quality control is based on the flimsy idea of the final interaction being correct. So when these systems got trained, they had like real users, end users, mostly underpaid people in a third world country that work 24 hours without extra pay. And they had the idea of like, if somebody asks a question, and the last result is actually not being interacted with anymore, then it got weighed higher. So basically that meant the product was there, people were happy with the result, but that's a very, very problematic thing. Like it's like arguing with your partner and saying like, is everything okay? And she or her is like, yeah, everything is okay. You know that's not the end of the conversation. You probably should ask a few more questions because you might get into trouble otherwise. So saying like just because the interaction with the machine was terminated, you got the right results is actually not a right way of doing something, because you might be just so frustrated that you don't want to talk to the machine anymore and just do a normal web search afterwards. And I can prove that with like when all the personal assistants came out, Google Siri, Alexa, Cortana, Samsung Bixby, and all the 3 users it had. We used to have these things, and everything was like, everything is going to be a bot for those things. The Cortana is going to sort out your life. Siri is going to be, you're going to stand up in the morning and say like, Alexa, what's my day like? And you're going to get your tasks done and everything. And what do we use these things for? Set an alarm for 5 minutes called pasta is ready. And that's basically what we do nowadays, because we've been frustrated so many times by these things not giving us answers back that make sense, or not understanding us because we got an accent. So it's kind of tricky to actually say this is running our lives. Chatbots are shifty. That's something that I think everybody should remember because of the way they've been built. So AI chatbots rely on lots of information converted to an ML model. Like the more information, the better. That's why the big companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft all have these chatbots, because they got truckloads of data that we gave them or we didn't give them. They just indexed, and we're not knowing that it actually has been indexed. So there's no insight what was indexed and what was actually, and if it's actually okay to do. I'm quite sure that all my GitHub repos, my open source repos were indexed. I'm quite sure that my blog was indexed, but I was never asked if that's okay. I was never asked if that data goes into a chatbot, and there is no robots.txt for LLMs. People are thinking about that right now, that actually you could tell in your GitHub repo, please, these files are okay to index, but these are actually bad quality, don't index them. But we haven't gotten any standard for that yet. There's also no information how the quality was assessed. Like, was it really like if people stopped interacting with it, then it got weighed higher? Or was it just like, okay, this is good enough, let's put that in there? So we don't have any insight into how this data was accumulated and trained, and that's why they're shifty. And building, weighing, and querying these models is very expensive. That's why only large corporations are doing it, and lots of startups pretending that they're doing it by using the APIs of the large corporations. So there's like the amount of startups that are just a ChatGPT plugin is immense. There's like 3 new ones on LinkedIn every day. And as these are expensive and are hard to do, that's a problem, because as soon as you use the free or the cheap tiers, they're actually outdated and old. So free tiers are limited and rely on smaller models with outdated information, sometimes years old. I created that with AI. I don't know why it said outdated and not necessary anymore. I had a picture of Dylan there. I don't know why. So chatbot generated code, because of that, is very likely to have a few issues. It references outdated techniques. A lot of times, especially in CSS or especially in like 3D environments, it gives you like tutorials from 6 years ago and that information in there, because those were the ones that people who didn't want to understand that language love it. Like on Skillshare, when you get answers to CSS, the design of a not junior but senior engineer is that a senior engineer knows the 4th answer is the right one, not the first one. The first one is always the simple one, the one that gives you the immediate result but might be outdated and might not be necessary any longer. it gives the easy answer, not the best. So it gives the one like that makes you feel good, like, ooh, I'm a developer now because I got this great answer. And it's not, the results are probably not usable because you don't know the license or where it came from. And most of us have to have some audits of our code sooner or later to see what systems we used. I mean, there's a few people here who work on government websites. I know there's like 6-month audits, and what you write in between is not going to get audited anymore. And if you already have outdated stuff from the LLM, that's a problem. There could be a performance, security, and compliance issue. One thing that I found lately is that there's companies out there that actually target results from ChatGPT and see if modules proposed, like NPM modules and NPM components proposed by LLM, actually exist or don't exist. And if they don't exist, then they write a malware component and put it into NPM. So basically people install malware into their own systems because they use chatbot created content, and companies or like bad actors actually do that to find out where the vulnerabilities are. But that's not a new thing. Like 2015, I wrote about an idea called the full stack overflow developer, which is something that happens. It's like people that actually don't want to understand something, they just go to Stack Overflow, find the first result, copy and paste the code, change some numbers around. If nothing explodes, they put it back into the product because they obviously written something cool. And it's not uncommon. We've done that all the time. Like we learned web development by looking at the source code of other websites. But Stack Overflow was like really a big thing there. The best trick about Stack Overflow, don't ask a question, propose something wrong, and then let people tell you that you're wrong. You get so many more answers and so much faster. It's really, really easy. But then again, you get these things being indexed by these chatbots again. How many times have you seen like a social media thing like, what is this, wrong answers only, because we're funny that way? But the machine would not know that these are wrong answers. They would still index them and mix them in with the others. And the interesting bit is that Google and Amazon, and I think Microsoft to a degree as well, now actually announced internally, all of them, that their own engineers are not allowed to use ChatGPT to generate code. So it's a proper do as I say, don't do as I do kind of thing. Like, oh, it's great for you, but we don't trust it, so don't use that. But it's the same for your company probably. You cannot use that system without understanding it. It's tempting though, isn't it? The generated answers sound great and convincing, especially in English. In other languages, not so much. But I mean, ChatGPT always sounds reasonable in what it says, but it doesn't necessarily have content that really makes sense. Even when it talks absolute bollocks, it sounds like it's actually making sense. And that's why I call it mansplaining as a service. It actually sounds great, but it might be complete nonsense, and you actually have to know what nonsense is and what isn't nonsense. And that's the big focus shift that it means to our jobs right now. We are moving away from writing code to reviewing code. And that's been a normal thing in our careers as web developers anyway. So we always had like the junior developer, senior, lead, and principal. And as a junior developer, you write a lot of code, and the higher up you get, the less code you actually write, because you're too expensive. You have to sit in meeting rooms and show PowerPoints to directors or something like that instead. Whereas like reviewing code is more that you do. Like you, as a senior developer, you review the code of the junior developers to make sure what can be reused, what's clean, what's better, where are problems. And now with generated code, we're kind of moving away. We lose one level. So junior and senior kind of becomes one level now. And principal and lead might be another thing, because these are more like people task-driven things rather than code-driven things. So what can we do about that to know that actually that we need to be reviewing code more than actually writing code ourselves? I think using AI systems in context is the biggest one. And there's these AI peer programmers, GitHub Copilot, Code Whisperer from Amazon, Ghostwriter by Replit. And they're actually more than automated copy and paste. They're more like the get things from Stack Overflow and put it in your code. They recognize the context where you use them, the product that you use them in, the code base that you use them in, and how you've written code before. The more I used Copilot, the more it wrote code the way I would write it anyways, or the rest of my team would write. And that way we found a way to actually write more code together. Style recognition and mimicking of what I do. Code explanation is possible. You can translate code from one language to another, which is like massively faulty. But at the same time, it's a really cool thing if I'm a JavaScript developer and I want to learn about Python. Taking some of my code and converting it to Python and then taking a look at that is probably a simpler way than to start with Hello World again. And learning. The results get better the more you use it. So this is Copilot in action. I basically just say like, I have a code base here and say like, write me another function in here. And bit by bit, it proposes me more lines and then the function is ready. And I can highlight it then and say like, explain to me what that is. And then it explains in English what that method does. I can even then generate tests for that method automatically from GitHub Copilot because it's in context and it knows the rest of the code around it. So these are the kind of things we can automate because we're staying in the development environment that we're in. There's another thing called code brushes, which I find is underused. So here's a JavaScript with one error in it because instead of doing a comparison, it has just a single equal sign. So it will never work. But you can highlight that one and have these buttons and say like, okay, fix this bug. Or then explain me more about that bug, make it more robust, add types. Like, so instead of having like code generated with you, these code brushes actually fix things for you and show you how to improve your code. So that's a more granular little approach to do things. There's also the chat client inside your code editor where you can actually query your old code base and you can query the environment that it's in right now rather than getting random stuff from the internet. And for some reason I got that twice in there. But the crucial step is validating and linting. And that's why it's great to use these things in your editor because you probably have set up testing already in there. So in this case, the product that I wrote, the developer tools extension for Visual Studio Code, would tell me from a generated image that there's an alternative attribute missing and the image is not accessible yet. So while I'm typing things, I'm getting these squiggly red lines and it tells me that there's something I need to fix, and also does that for generated code. There's also one for the command line, which I found really interesting, where you can type an English sentence and then it creates a bash script for you. And it also does immediately the explanation of what the bash script does. And then you can execute the bash script, or you can refine it, or you can discard it. So you're staying only in your terminal. You never go anywhere else anymore, and you don't copy and paste any code from the web out there. This is also great for Git help. So if you do question mark, how do I merge that thing without deleting that folder and so on, it gives you the Git commands for that. But what about quality and relevance? Because you don't want to have the random internet to query all the time. I think a great thing is to limit the sources. I understand that the chat interface is a very powerful thing, but only getting the source that actually is the content that you want to talk about makes a lot more sense. So this is Copilot for Docs. And what I like most about it is that it's got a filtering mechanism as the first thing. So I can say I'm an immediate developer, I'm an expert developer, I know this material well, and I want a balanced response, or I want only the facts, or I want like a tutorial how to learn it. So instead of giving everybody the same results, you can pre-filter those. So these are actually prompts that are written in there, but they did a graphical interface to do that, which makes a lot more sense. So in this case, I now question MDN, and I ask it something. I do. And then it actually gives me the results, much like ChatGPT, but it also gives me the references on the side where in the official documentation that it's from. So it's actually validated by a real editor who wrote this, and I can copy the code out there, and it does that for all kind of docs out there. So if your documentation is on GitHub, you can actually use that for indexing it as well. I think it's important for us to peek under the hood and learn how these things work, not just ChatGPT does stuff for you. How does ChatGPT work would be interesting to know. Deep Learning AI has a course called ChatGPT Prompt Engineering for Developers that basically is a JavaScript course where you can actually write JavaScripts to run against the API without having to have a key and actually work through it. It's like a 1-hour course that was fun to take. Google has a generative AI learning path, which actually tells you from the beginning how generative AI works, how these models are being trained, what to do with them. And I think right now is a great time to be a developer who cares about users, as we can automate the boring bits. Like, we can actually do a lot of scaffolding using a Copilot kind of thing, or an Amazon Code Whisperer kind of thing, and we can host that on our own machines with the Llama or other offline products. But it's more important that we think about, like, what can AI do for us that we don't want to do by hand? And then we can actually integrate this AI experience in our normal work, because that way we become more efficient. We're not being replaced by those things. So it's great to know about these things, but it's also very important to teach people around you that it's not replacing us, but it's actually making us more efficient, and we got more time to do things like user research, security checkups, like really things to make better quality code rather than just writing more code faster. One of my favorite bits was when GitHub Copilot announced that they're going to have a speech recognition soon in as well. So you can actually write code by talking. And it's an accessibility feature for people who can't type. So it's a necessary thing to release it. And actually it makes sense because not everybody can type fast or knows how to do it. But you could actually start writing code by talking to your machine. And there was this YouTube guy who basically got super excited. And he's like, that's great. So I can now be on my cross trainer or on the treadmill and code while I'm working out. And I'm just like wanted to punch YouTube, because like if that's your attitude, that you basically want to code wherever you are and you got to do more and more and more and more, please get in the sea. We got to be better than that. We got to be nicer to each other. We got to be developers that build things for humans, not write more code faster. And that's all I had. So you can contact me any way you want. Here's again the URL with all the information, and thanks very much.
I always forget that you like to troll me in your talks, and then by the time I remember, it's been a year. So
I also troll you anywhere, so it really doesn't.
I know. Any questions for Chris?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about AI eating itself, consuming its own content to train future models. How do you think that's going to affect code-based?
So the question was like AI writing its own prompts and actually starting to train itself and doing things. I think the quality problem is even exacerbated that way. So basically, if you already have a flawed product, a flawed model that actually is outdated, and then actually making the machine question it more and more and making it faster, it actually gives you more focused results, but not better quality. So I think prompt engineering, as weird as it sounds, is one of the big things to learn right now, to actually make sure that we ask these machines the right question to filter out the rubbish and actually get only the right information back. And most of the time, you can do that with human language in ChatGPT, but as a developer, like the filtering mechanisms that I showed, those were prompts in the background. So people actually wrote those to make sure that only the results come back in the right way. So I don't think the idea of AI training itself is a great headline, but I don't think it's actually a thing that's happening right now. The same way when a lot of companies now ask the American government to regulate AI, I think that's just a kind of like covering their own ass. First of all, they don't want to get sued. But second of all, it's also like a showing off, like we're further away. I'm actually much more interested in asking these companies, where does that data come from? Do you pay anything to the person who actually wrote the original code? Is the license okay to use? What did you do about making these things secure? To not get these questions, they're already telling us, oh, machines will code themselves, so make sure we regulate that somehow in politics, rather than like, what did you do to build that thing? Get us more insight into that one is more exciting to me.